Canada is at a crossroads. Trade tensions, border challenges, a changing global landscape. At home, a new government. Abroad, shifting alliances. Lisa Raitt has seen it from the inside. Former federal minister, now in global investment banking at CIBC. Join us May 6th at the Carleton Dominion-Chalmers Centre in downtown Ottawa. Hear her take on where Canada goes from here.
Good evening, everyone. This is almost like being in a lecture hall where everybody starts to get nice and quiet, just right on time. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Josh Greenberg. I'm the Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Public and Global Affairs at Carleton University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Dick, Ruth, and Judy Bell Lecture. This year's lecture, Canada at a Crossroads, Navigating an Uncertain Future, will be delivered by the Honourable Lisa Raitt. Now, I had somebody approach me earlier and say, how did you figure out the timing of this lecture a week after the election on a topic like this? And I actually reached out to Lisa last September to invite her to give this lecture. And at the time, I think it was becoming clear that we were moving towards a kind of moment of increased and heightened uncertainty and probably a federal election at some point in the future. We kind of randomly picked this date because it was just at the tail end of the academic year. People are still around, they haven't gone on holidays. And by good fortune, we landed a week after an election. And I don't think any of us could have imagined the drama of that election in the months leading up to it, the drama of the days since the election, and for those who monitor politics closely, the hours of this particular day. But drawing on her very impressive political experience and exceptional record of public service, I think Ms. Raitt, who chose the title of this lecture and the focus of this lecture back in September, knew what she was likely to see, that we were in fact heading toward a more turbulent and fluid political environment, a more turbulent and fluid policy environment, and that this would raise important and challenging questions for Canada, for our new parliament, and for the government that has just been elected to lead us. Lots of challenges, of course, but perhaps opportunities and some silver linings, and I'm sure Ms. Raitt will share her observations, assessments, and perhaps some recommendations about how we as a country are going to navigate this complex and ever-changing landscape. The events like this take a long time to put together, and I want to just take a moment to thank several people for their roles in helping to bring this event to fruition. Our staff here at the Carleton Dominion-Chalmers Centre, our student volunteers in the graduate program in political management, and our fantastic events and communications team in the Faculty of Public and Global Affairs. We're also thrilled to be joined by our new President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Wisdom Tete, who I will invite to the podium in just a couple of minutes to offer land acknowledgement and welcoming remarks on behalf of the university. Dr. Tete will be followed by Dr. Brenda O'Neill, Dean of the Faculty of Public and Global Affairs, who will introduce this evening's speaker, Ms. Raitt. And at the conclusion of Ms. Raitt's presentation, she will be joined by our colleague, Dr. Jonathan Malloy, Professor of Political Science, and the Honourable Dick and Ruth Bell Chair in Canadian Parliamentary Democracy. A few housekeeping notes before I exit stage left and we get on with the rest of the event. First, you'll see a QR code on the screen. We encourage you, of course, to put your hand up and to ask questions. There will be mics around. I think there's a QR code up the screen somewhere. At some point, I promise there will be a QR code on the screen. For those of you who have a mobile phone, if you'd like to scan the code and enter your questions, we have staff who will review the questions, and we will do our very best to get to those questions that are posed this way. Of course, if you wish to raise your hand and ask a question in the room, there will be opportunities to do that as well. And some of you, when you registered, submitted questions. So there's going to be lots of opportunity for discussion. And I know Ms. Raitt and Jonathan are looking forward to that. Restrooms are available through the ramp to my left, just around the left-hand side. In the event that we need to exit the building quickly, there are emergency exits at the back of the hall and at the main entrance where you came in this evening. I would now like to invite our President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Wisdom Tete, to the podium to offer welcoming remarks on behalf of the university. Dr. Tete.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's event. It's a pleasure to see such a great turnout. This is part of the reason why a location like this that allows the university to be immersed in the community is important. But also this place reminds us about the importance of acknowledging our location on these lands that are the traditional territory and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. We're grateful to be able to work and to live and to engage one another in a space like this. And particularly on an occasion like this, taking into account the location where we are, understanding the historical tensions between places like this and our Indigenous community gives us reason to pause and to think about how we may work together to reconcile ourselves to our history, to be able to understand how our histories have informed our presence, and to work together for a better future that ensures that those historical ills do not continue to fester. I want to start off by just thanking all of you for finding it necessary to convene in this venue, because the opportunity to have conversations, particularly on matters that are critical to our society, is the reason why creating a community where knowledge is shared, where ideas are bounced off one another, and where we're able to forge ahead together because we believe in the value of sharing knowledge in ways that are enabling of our collective values and our future together as a society. And I'll turn to my colleague, the Dean, to tell you about our speaker. But I'm thrilled to be in a place where I'm able to hear from an experienced individual in the person of our honored speaker this evening to tell us about something that is critical and on the minds of many of us. I think Josh was saying earlier about how the hours and the minutes seem to turn into something eternal these days. And so on a day like this, I'm just thrilled, as I'm sure most of you are, to be in a place where we can hear and understand and see how we may be able to navigate the challenges that confront us. So with that, I'm going to turn over the podium to, where is she? To Dr. Brenda O'Neill, who is the Dean of our faculty, to say a few words of introduction this evening. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks. Like President Teddy said, it's wonderful to see so many people here this evening. This is one of our key events in the faculty. Every spring we hold the Dick, Ruth, and Judy Bell lecture, and it's a highlight for us. And who better to host it than the Faculty of Public and Global Affairs? It's the home of political science, political management, public policy, international affairs. It is, in essence, what we do. It was established by Ruth Bell, a Carleton political science alumna, and it honors the contributions of individuals to the political and public life of Canada across all parties and all levels of government. The lecture has featured some of the top names in Canadian political life, and tonight is no exception. I'm pleased to introduce the Honourable Lisa Raitt, although I don't believe she needs really any introduction. She was born in Sydney, Nova Scotia, which according to my husband, who's also from Nova Scotia, means that she is good people. She was first elected to the House of Commons in 2008 as a member of the Conservative Party, where she served as the Minister of Natural Resources, Minister of Labour, and Minister of Transport. In 2015, she was appointed finance critic for the official opposition, and in 2017, she was appointed deputy leader of the official opposition and deputy leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. She is now managing director and vice chair in global investment banking at CIBC Capital Markets, and previously she served as the president and CEO of the Toronto Port Authority. In 2020, Ms. Raitt was named a Woodrow Wilson Centre Global Fellow at the Canada Institute. And I had the pleasure of having dinner with her this evening, and one of the things she noted is how unusual it can be where you end up at the end of your career given where you start. And I learned that she has a master's in chemistry and then went on to do a law degree. And here she is. I'm very pleased to welcome her, the Honourable Lisa Raitt.
Am I okay to use? Okay, that's great. I don't know if I need that extra step. Do I look gigantic up here? I feel gigantic. Nope, I'm going to take the moment. Absolutely. Just as long as I don't fall off, we're all good. Thank you very much, Dean, for mentioning the last part that you did, that where we're talking about careers. Now, what the Dean kindly didn't point out, of course, is the fact that my greatest lessons have been found in failure. I did do my master's in chemistry. There were no jobs when I graduated from the university in Guelph for anyone in biochemical toxicology in 1993. And as a result, I ended up saying, fine, I'll write the MCAT, to which my family cheered, and the LSAT, to which my family booed, because you want a doctor in the family when you're from Nova Scotia, there's no question, especially when you're from Cape Breton. And I was writing the MCAT, if that's what I can say I was doing, and I realized about 30 minutes in that I actually was supposed to study for this test. And it wasn't just something I could wing. Great big failure there. But from that failure, I learned that I had to study for the LSAT, and I ended up getting a law degree. And much along the same lines, although I am a good lawyer, I wasn't a great intellectual property lawyer, and I lost my first job as a lawyer. So I had to pay the bills, and I went to a place. Do you guys remember the place Kelly Temporaries? It used to be the Kelly Girls, where you would go for temps. Well, I'm glad. Thank you for nodding, ma'am. I appreciate that. So I went to the temp agency and I signed up to get a job, and they made me test my typing. Thank goodness the nuns taught me how to type when I was at Holy Angels High School, and I passed the tests. Remember, at this point, I've got a law degree and a master's in chemistry, and I'm like 11 years higher education, and I'm going to be an assistant. I ended up being the assistant to a gentleman who was the chair of what was known as the Toronto Harbour Commission at the time. And they wanted an assistant for him to basically run interference because he kept trying to meddle in the day-to-day activities of the port. And the CEO said, I can't handle having this chair with me all the time. Let's get somebody to be the in-between. That became me. I went away after that for a year to London. I had a scholarship, and when I came back, they said, would you like to be the general counsel? You seem to know a lot about what's happening here, and we changed from a harbor commission to a port authority. We think we need a lawyer, and they fired everybody else, and there's a new board, so why don't you come back? And I said, sure, okay, I'll try it for a year, and then 2 years later, I was the CEO. So see, from failure comes success. And I would say the same too when I lost in 2019. Although it was, it's not fun to lose an election, and unfortunately there's a lot of my friends who didn't win this time. Now there is a friend of mine who did win this time, John Nader, who's here as well, Member of Parliament for Perth Wellington. Thank you. I can't remember everyone's right, and we all switched recently too, so it's hard to keep track. But after I lost there, you know, there's nothing more centering than knowing that you don't get your salary anymore. The thing that happens in politics that you may not know, I do have a formal speech, by the way, don't worry. It's not going to be me riffing all day. It's going to be okay. We'll get there. I'm getting there. I was told I have an hour to fill, so you're stuck with me. The thing that you don't realize for members of parliament, and I didn't realize this myself, is that election day, if you don't win, your last day of payment was the day before election day. The person who wins the seat that night gets the paycheck. And that night, when I'm being interviewed by all of the people on different, different news people, some of them secretly happy I lost, but most of them, definitely wanting to understand how it felt. In my mind, all that kept going through my mind was, how am I going to pay my mortgage? Like, I had a mortgage to pay in 2 weeks. And luckily, there is a transition for members of parliament, but nothing focuses the mind. And then from that moment forward, I was just looking for a job, and I landed at CIBC, and it's been 5 years. They haven't fired me yet, so they can't get rid of me now. That's the way I look at it. By the way, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am delighted to be here. I know that we're here for a period of time. I do enjoy question and answer. If you do have questions, I'm more than delighted to at least give you my perspective, and I think engagement is always good. But I do warn you ahead of time, I am a former politician, and as Prime Minister Harper and the rest of us used to say, it's called question period, not answer period. As a result, you may not get the whole thing. And then the last note before I commence my talk is I can also speak in one of the tricks of the trade that you have as a former politician, at least in Parliament, is you can speak in certain time frames. I can give you a 20-minute speech because that's the maximum amount of time we would get in the House to give a speech. Usually you had to share it, so I can also give a 10-minute speech. I can give a 5-minute speech, which is usually done at committee. I can also give you a 30-second answer, which is what you want to do in question period as well. So the Dean has been kind enough to sit in the front to give me a signal if I'm going way over my time, and I can judge accordingly. And one last thing, I know you had a picture of me up there. Somebody photoshopped a really lovely brooch onto my suit. And I want to thank you because it's the best piece of fashion advice that I've ever gotten. And I'm going to have to go and find that brooch because I still have the suit. I am a conservative. I keep these things. There it is. Look, that is not me. Somebody decided that I needed to be spruced up, and well done. Now, you feel free to put any other, like diamonds, whatever, wish lists. I'd be happy with all of that. And I'm honored as well. This space is absolutely wonderful, Ms. President. It's incredible to be here. But I will tell you, I'm a little bit wary. I was born in Cape Breton, and I was educated by the Sisters of the Congregation of Notre Dame. It is weird being up here on a podium in front of the congregation. That is something no nun in Cape Breton ever wanted me to do, but that's okay. And it's very appropriate and fitting, though, because this is about as close to conclave as I'm ever going to get. And we will not have smoke tonight, unless you want to use smoke to determine if this is a good speech or a bad speech. It's completely up to you. But with that, I will now go to the serious part of the evening, which is talking about the crossroads that we face ourselves. And Josh is right. When we first talked back in September, he was first of all, you were very persistent, which was great because it's hard to get attention when there's a lot going on. And the person who works with me and my team, her name is Amber Batul, and Amber said, Lisa, we really need a title for this. They want a title so they can start advertising. I said, that makes sense, but what are we going to call it? Like, what's happening? There's so much going on in the world. So we literally came up with what we thought was going to be a placeholder of a name, but it turns out is quite appropriate. I mean, and it really is one of those moments in time. Now, the Prime Minister, he has a book that's coming out, and it's called, I think he talks about this concept of a hinge moment in history. And I think that is appropriate. I think that's kind of where we are right now. But I do want to begin by thanking Carleton University for the invitation to speak and for creating this platform, which is a really neat place for us to be able to have a thoughtful discussion about the future of our country. And it really is a privilege to be able to address all of you this evening, especially since I know it's full of students and scholars and professors, policymakers, and engaged citizens, which is always really nice to see. Canada at a crossroads, navigating an uncertain future. I was hoping that what you would get from that is a sense of urgency and a sense of possibility, because it's both, looking at the future It may be uncertain, but there is a future. And that's something to look forward to. But I do know, especially in the last couple of months, having been able to go across the country, but from urban downtowns to rural communities, from Parliament Hill to kitchen tables, Canadians are asking, where are we going? And what's ahead? Are we prepared? But let's take a look at where we stand right now as a country in 2025. That's not my phone. Or, no, it's not. I don't know, I left my phone somewhere. Okay. Canada remains, let's take a look at where we are in 2025. Canada remains one of the most stable and fortunate nations in the world. We do benefit from a high standard of living. We have abundant natural resources. We have a strong safety net. And we have a multicultural society that has largely resisted the extremes of division that we see elsewhere. Our public institutions, while under stress, still broadly are trusted by the international community. But underneath the surface, there is something that seems to be shifting. Our economic growth is tepid. Our productivity is declining. The cost of living has outpaced wages. Home ownership feels out of reach for so many young Canadians. And at the same time, geopolitical volatility is rising. Democratic norms are under pressure, and the climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. We feel that here. So there is a growing feeling in the country that we're drifting, that we're responding to problems rather than anticipating them, and that the ambition that once defined our great national projects, from Medicare to multiculturalism, is harder to summon. Canada's economic model is built on natural resource exports. It's built on immigration, and it's built on public services. And it has delivered us prosperity, but the cracks are appearing. Our productivity ranks near the bottom among OECD countries. We are investing less in research and development. Our tax system is outdated, and it actually discourages business investment. And despite record immigration levels, we have not built the housing, the transit, or the credentialing systems that we need to keep up. So we have to ask ourselves, especially at this moment, do we have the courage to reform our systems for the future? That does mean modernizing a tax code. That means encouraging innovation clusters. It means investing in AI, in quantum, in clean tech, and it means making hard choices about regulatory efficiency. And we also need a bold housing plan, one that unites all levels of government and rebalances supply and demand, because without it, we risk permanently eroding the Canadian dream of middle-class stability. Now, since I left politics, I haven't lost my love of public policy. And in 2021, Anne McClellan and I, you may remember Anne McClellan, former cabinet minister for Mr. Chrétien and Mr. Martin, Liberal, Conservative, we came together to co-chair something called Coalition for a Better Future. And the reason why we came together at the time was because at that point, we had had 7 national elections and returned 5 minority governments. And now we're at 8 national elections and 6 minority governments. And the key to that is that when you have a minority government, and she sat in, I don't think she sat in one. No, she bragged she didn't sit in one. She was lucky. I sat in a couple of minority governments, and I've observed a number of them as well. But I can tell you that when you're sitting in a minority government, one of the things that does come up frequently is, how do I get to a majority government? And as such, you may not have the appetite to actually do the big, bold projects that take political capital and long-term thinking. And as a result, Anne and I thought it'd be important for us to talk about long-term economic growth for the country that has a plan, that is inclusive, and that is sustainable. And we asked organizations, mainly in the Ottawa area, but they're national in nature, if they would join us in this endeavor. And we have 140 organizations that represent, in the worker space, probably 1 million people. But we knew that we weren't necessarily of the think tank nature. Ottawa shelves are filled with study after study, report after report from various people telling you what the problem is and how you should fix it. But unfortunately, and I'm guilty of this as well, they stay on the shelf. They may not last through one government to another, definitely not from one partisan government to another. And as a result, all that good work doesn't really necessarily see the light of day. We didn't want to do that. So what we decided was we were going to go to the heart of the issue. And the heart of the issue is giving Canadians and civil society the tools to make decisions around how they think the economy is doing. We were lucky enough to work with the Business Council of Canada. They agreed to help us develop a system or a scorecard of 21 key performance indicators for the country. We're going to measure them each and every year from 2021 all the way out to 2030. And the reason why we're doing this is because these metrics stay exactly the same every year. We don't change them. We don't refocus. We don't move our guardrails. These are the ones that we focus on. And that gives us an ability to see the trajectory of how we're doing. Now, this month, May 22nd, Anne and I are going to be here in Ottawa. We're going to be releasing this year's numbers, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in our talk. But the reason why I bring it up is to show that one of the crossroads that we're at isn't not necessarily only about Donald Trump in the United States and geopolitics. We have ample information and data to indicate and show that Canada, of its own volition, is really not hitting the mark. In fact, we are missing the mark completely, and we are in danger of putting future generations into jeopardy. But we do have to talk about the United States because it is in a period of political flux, and it's our largest trading partner. And if we look at China, we also know that those relations are more strained than ever. We have a war in Ukraine. We have threat of conflict in the Indo-Pacific. We have conflict today between India and Pakistan. We have instability in the Middle East. And all of these things demand, clear positions from a government. So not only are we worried about our own economic domestic world, we also have to think about principled positions on the world stage. Canada's foreign policy identity in the new era is going to have to be one that is well thought out. Are we peacekeepers or are we peace builders? Or are we something entirely new? Are we ready to defend Arctic sovereignty? Are we ready to protect our digital infrastructure? And are we ready to contribute meaningfully to NATO? And I would say that we do have to reinvest in diplomacy, intelligence, and strategic trade diversifications, and we have to defend our core values abroad. But you cannot do any of this unless you have an economy that is resilient and is working for the country. Plain and simple. Canada is an energy superhouse. Actually, I said that wrong. Canada is an energy powerhouse. We used to say that it was a superpower. The Prime Minister as well today talks about the importance of energy to Canada and the advantage and the leverage that it gives us in negotiations on the world stage. But we are a high per capita emitter. And we face the dual challenge of reducing our emissions while preserving energy security and economic opportunity, especially in places that are in the business of energy: British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador. So we can't afford to frame this any longer, and we've done this. We can't do this anymore. We cannot frame this as an either or. We have to build that pragmatic path forward. We have to scale our renewables, because we should. We have to advance carbon capture, especially in the prairies. And we have to invest in nuclear energy. We also have to accelerate at the same time climate adaptation strategies. We have to prepare for wildfires. I heard on CBC this morning, yes, I know I'm a conservative that listens to CBC, it's okay. I heard this morning that it's wildfire season, earlier than expected. We have to think about flooding. We have to think about extreme weather, because these things are already impacting Canadians' lives. There is no credible future for Canada that does not include meaningful climate action. The Prime Minister and I actually were on a task force together in the past 2 years, and it was on climate and housing and climate. I was the co-chair of a task force with Don Iveson, former mayor of Edmonton and now the chair of the Canadian Mortgage Home CMHC. Acronyms in Ottawa go together like peanut butter and jelly, and I don't always know what they are, but CMHC, and you know what I mean when I say it. John will tell me what it stands for later. I remember, but I don't have the exact words. But we were brought together by some philanthropic interests who wanted us to take a look, along with a bevy of really knowledgeable experts from different parts of the housing field across the country, represented both geographically and in terms of what sector of the business you were in. And the theme of the task force was, we realize and recognize that according to CMHC, we have to build 5.2 million homes in this country. That's our shortage. But we also know that if we built the 5.2 million homes in the current systems that we currently use, in the current process we use, we will absolutely blow whatever emissions reductions that we have had. It'll blow the cap off completely. And as a result, we have to think about new ways that we're going to go forward. There's lots of great work being done by many different pieces of civil society trying to move the ball forward in terms of getting to solutions for those kinds of things. Housing and climate is one that are very much entwined, and I would also submit is not one that is subject to partisanship. We all do agree, from those who are in the insurance industry to those who advocate for green energy in the home. Those are things that we have to take a look at and make sure when we have an opportunity to build the supply and balance the demand that we do so. All of the problems that I've given you, we know. I'm sure you've heard this before, but here's my hook. In order for us to actually do something about this, we need leaders. We need leaders who are willing to take long-term risks in a short-term political culture. It's exactly the same that we felt in 2021 when we came together with the coalition, as I feel today, even more so today, especially since we have a new Prime Minister. It could be so easy just to continue on a very small, narrow path and not take the opportunities that we have, or not recognize the warning, flashing lights we have on our economy right now, and keep to a small, singular path that gives you a win at the end of the day, but doesn't actually advance our country, because it's getting harder and harder and harder to actually skate. We've done it for 20 years. Notice I said 20 years. I'm blaming all of us, all partisan stripes, all factions. We skated for 20 years without taking a really hard look at what it is we have to do to ensure that we have long-term growth in the country that is both sustainable and inclusive. We need citizens who demand better. And I know the timing is off because we just went through an election. But what I'd hoped for this election was a deeper discussion on the economy and on long-term growth. And we didn't quite get there. That's okay. There's always going to be another election. It's not going to include me, but there's always going to be another election. And as a result, I would ask you, as you sit here today, think about how you want to be engaged in the next election. A healthy democracy requires more than just watching the polls or listening to debates. It requires participation. It requires curiosity and accountability. And when the MP or the candidate comes to your door, don't hide behind your Ring doorbell. Open the door and talk to them and let them know what you think. Because it does go back to the corridors of Ottawa when you take the time to talk to the person there. That is our job. We take it very seriously. Or that was my job. That is the job. And we take it very seriously, and I encourage you to take it. Nobody in this country can have the ability to sit back and watch what's happening because we've simply run out of time. Canada is at a crossroads, but we're not without a map, and we're not without values. And we're not without each other. The future is not built by accident. It's going to be built by choice. Bold, hard, but hopeful ones. So let's choose innovation over inertia. Let's choose collaboration over division. And let's choose action over drift. The road ahead is uncertain. We have to navigate it together. But we need to do it with clarity, we have to do it with courage, and we have to do it with compassion. I do believe that the best chapters of the Canadian story do lie ahead. I do believe that we have it in this country to fulfill what we all want, which is the next generation to do even better than what we did. But it's going to take a lot of work for us to get there, and a recognition that we can't do it alone. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to our questions, and I have lots more that I can say. And who's coming? You're coming to ask me questions, but I think, Josh, you're coming up to relieve me while I walk over to. Thank you very much for your attention, everybody.
So I am the transitional act while we move from formal to informal presentation. Thank you. So thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful. And so, as I said at the outset, this portion of the Bell Lecture will be a Q&A conversation with my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Malloy, with Lisa, and drawing on questions that you have submitted in advance. I did promise there would be a QR code. It is now up on both screens. Please take advantage of the technology if you wish to submit your questions. We have monitors up front, so your questions will be shown to Lisa and Jonathan. And this is really an opportunity to engage, to have some conversation, a little bit of debate, and maybe spice things up a little bit. We'll see how that goes. So it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jonathan Malloy. This is now the second time this evening I've introduced Jonathan. So Jonathan Malloy is a professor of political science at Carleton University, and he is also the Bell Chair in Canadian Parliamentary Democracy. Jonathan is a prolific author and speaker, multiple awards, both for his teaching and his research. His most recent book, The Paradox of Parliament, correct? University of Toronto Press, was published in 2023, an excellent book. Jonathan will draw on his knowledge of politics, which I understand started as an intern in the Ontario legislature in 1992, and he's been obsessed with parliamentary democracy ever since. So an opportunity to talk politics, public policy, and I'll turn things over to you now, Jonathan.
Right. Thank you very much, Josh. Obsessed with politics. Yeah, I'm sure. So we do encourage you to use the QR code for your questions. That way we can get more questions and get through them. And then they're appearing. We've got some screens in front of us. So, in fact, I'm kind of superfluous here because Lisa can see the questions as well as I can. But I get to ask the questions, and it sounds like I'm brilliant and stuff. And they are your questions that people either gave us when they registered for this event, or that you're sending in on your QR codes. So with that, Lisa, I think we will ask the first question, which is sitting right in front of us here. Do you think the recent threats from the United States served as a distraction from other issues in this recent election?
No, I don't. I don't think anything distracts in an election. I think I've come to the conclusion, John, that you take from elections what you want to take from an election. And in this election, different parts of our society heard different things. And that's what leaders are supposed to do. That's what a platform does. It's a smorgasbord of everything that you want. Pick from this column and this column, and pick the leader you want to put these things in place. But I don't think it served as a distraction. It certainly did not serve as a distraction for people under the age of 35. They were not moved by it. I think my children are 23 and 20. They don't pay as much attention to Donald Trump and the US administration as my best friend next door neighbor, who is not 23. She's my age, so she's in her late 50s. And that consumes a lot of our discussion. So it depends upon where you are in your life and how you are. I don't think it distracts one bit from what leaders are putting out. Maybe people are paying attention to it. Did it move their vote? You'll have to ask them. I'm not convinced it actually moved people's votes necessarily. So you have to be prepared for anything happening in an election. It's called a black swan event. You don't anticipate or expect it. Every election has one. And in this case, it was Mr. Trump, and he's popping up every 5 to 7 days to talk about us being the 51st state. But don't you think that, aren't we at the point where it happens again? You go, again, okay, there, again. He said it again, he said it again. I mean, Chicken Little, the sky is falling.
It's like a drinking game. Every time he says it or something, that he says it so often. It's good.
I pray for your liver. Yeah.
Let me push you, because you mentioned young people, you mentioned your own children, and things like that. Do you think, because something I heard in this election was, well, this isn't really speaking to young people, this is old people's fears and stuff like that. Was that your sense of the election?
Well, let me tell you about the polling that we've done in the coalition. I don't think the election caused the difference. I think there's been a difference that we haven't clued into. So as I mentioned, Coalition for a Better Future, we had 21 key performance indicators. It became apparent there are two parts of Canadian society that we needed to do a deeper dive on. One was rural Canada, quite frankly, because it usually is overlooked. And we've got lots of information and data, just how they're lagging behind on broadband, they're lagging behind on healthcare, and those kinds of things, because they're not flyover communities. Canadians don't believe in that. But the second aspect that we knew we had to talk to was we had to speak to young people. So Anne McClellan and I actually do go across the country. We were here at Carleton, actually, I think in the fall. We were here in the fall to talk to Carleton about our Coalition for a Better Future, and we've been from St. Francis Xavier, where I graduated, all the way out to UBC. And we sensed and understood that there was an impatience and, I would say, a dissatisfaction in the younger generation. So we asked Nick Nanos to do some polling for us, and he's been doing it for 3 years, and we're really shocked. So let me tell you what we heard. They are the most pessimistic portion of society. When you ask them if we're going in the right or the wrong direction with respect to making sure we have a higher standard of living, 63.6% of them think we're going in the wrong direction. 63.6. If you ask them if we're making investments in innovation to be competitive on the world stage, 53% think we're going in the wrong direction. If you ask them if we're going to have strong economic growth, 56.5% think we're going in the wrong direction. And what Nick said to us when he got these results, and they have been staying in that range, he said it kind of floored him. And the reason why it floored him is because that's the optimistic generation. That's the generation who's supposed to be taking on the world, getting ready to burst upon the scene and change everything and have the first career and build a home and a house and a life and a family if that's what you want. I mean, that is what that generation is. And they are not in that set of systems. The other thing that came to our attention is there's this thing called the happiness index that is measured every year. It's a global index. Canada does fairly well. I think we came 13th this year. We dropped a few. If I was a partisan, I'd blame the Trudeau government, but I'm no longer a partisan, so I'm not going to do that. But I just did. Because I'm also passive aggressive, as you know. But what was interesting is when you dig underneath those numbers, if you are over 60 years old, you rank Canada in 5th place as being the happiest place in the world. If you are under 35, you rank Canada 58th place as being the happiest country in the world. So yeah, there is a big difference in the country, and it's not driven by politics. It's driven by what they see around them and their own perceptions. Are political parties trying to capture that and turn it into votes? Well, they should. That's what a good political party does. Don't know if it happened this time, but when I hear about more younger people voting Conservative, I am not surprised at all, because their dissatisfaction with the state of the country warrants them to be looking seriously at change.
What should that change be? Because young people are dissatisfied, they're not as happy like that. Are there concrete solutions that can be pursued for this?
Yeah, there are. I think what it comes back down to is what Anne and I talk about, long-term economic growth that is sustainable and inclusive. Number one, let's approve some projects in this country. Let's show business that investment can be had in the country, and that you are going to get a regulatory time frame that gives you comfort and confidence that your investment is going to be realized and that you're going to be able to do your project. Number one. And that is about fixing regulatory and not paying lip service to it, like actually doing the hard work of changing the system. That is something. Taxes. Taxes are killing our young people. You know, my younger son is 20, so he was a COVID kid, meaning that he was home during high school and through part of university. So even though it's illegal, and I know, he took up day trading. He used his brother's account, by the way, totally illegal. Thank gosh I wasn't a member of parliament. I didn't have to report him. But they traded together. And he's done okay. He doesn't make a whole bunch of money, but this year he made enough that he had to pay capital gains. And then he started researching the tax rates of other countries around the world and told me, Mom, Puerto Rico's pretty good. His aunt lives in Bermuda for that reason as well. And you know, the reality is that the burden is big. Let me give you another example. I now work in investment banking, and you may find it surprising, and it's quite shocking to me as well. But students who come into investment banking, which is really high-end primo kind of salary range, they're making in their first year enough money to put them in the top tax bracket, right out of the gate, 54%. And they are shocked. They're shocked. And then they look at the United States, where they do the same work, they get paid 25% more, they pay less taxes. Oh, but we have health care. We used to have health care, but now you have permission to wait in the line for 12 hours because you don't have a family doctor, because your doctor, who was your mom's family doctor, has retired and you don't have one anymore. You're on a list somewhere. So we're losing our advantage. So fix healthcare, another one. Let's put back into place the things that used to make up for our higher tax rate, which provided us a fantastic social safety net, which we believe in fundamentally, but also allows people to have more money for them to pursue what their dreams are. And the one thing about Donald Trump that I find interesting is he's actually blocking the brain drain for us in a way. The kids really don't, now they're really mad because now they really can't go to the United States. But, there's a lot of families whose children are working in the States right now for all of those reasons, doctors and lawyers and accountants. The professions are going there when they take a look at the way the taxation rolls. So taxes are important, folks. That's just a fundamental. And whenever we raise taxes on the rich, like the super rich, they hire really smart people to help them not pay as much. It's not tax avoidance, it's tax planning, right? And in some cases, they just leave the country because they can. And then that leaves the rest of us who are paid by T4s to pick up the slack.
One of the questions we have in front of us is simple, it's short. It's simply, how do we improve productivity? You've touched on it a number of times and some things you said there, but can you say more about productivity?
I have so much to say about productivity. One of the things that productivity is such a negative word because it implies that we don't work hard. But I would also say that that could be a little bit true. That could be, we could lack a little bit of ambition in this country that other countries, we may not be as hungry as other countries are. We should look at ourselves. We should really, not to quote the Prime Minister, but we should look inside ourselves. Come on, someone's got to laugh at that. That was funny. I'm trying my best up here, folks. The reality is that we have to make sure that not only are we the #1 country in the world, in the OECD, for the number of people, with the percentage of people we have in tertiary education, which we should be proud of. But on the other side, I don't know how productive we are. I don't know how ambitious we are. And I don't know if we start building out all these projects, are we going to have enough people to do it? So one aspect of productivity, I think that we should seriously look at is business investment. And business investment has fallen off a cliff. It is, in fact, I'm going to tell you what it is, because it kind of surprised me when I had my stat here. Sorry, folks. I have to use my glasses too on this one. But in terms of productivity in the country, shoot, sorry about this. Well, it's pretty abysmal. It says that it's basically, it's the worst in terms of business investment since World War II. And that is not a nice statistic to have to face in terms of what we're doing. So with the fact that we don't have business investing, it's actually going to hit how much people are making and how much people feel like they're making in terms of their, here it is. Business investment in research and development is dismally low at 0.75%, well behind most developed peers. The non-residential private sector investment, so we're taking home building out of the equation, as a share of nominal GDP has dropped to the lowest levels since the Second World War, and Canadian investments lag behind most G7 countries. And the crisis in productivity that this spurs on because they're not making investment actually does reflect in how our capita income levels are dropping as well. So in other words, we are probably $20,000 poorer per person in Canada than the United States is. Maybe it's 25,000, and certainly in Australia as well. So our dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. How do you fix productivity? You give businesses the environment to want to invest. And it goes back to regulatory, it goes back to taxation, it goes back to being business friendly. In this last election, one last thing, running up to this last election, before Mark Carney took over Liberal leader, and I'm sorry for being critical of my friends, there wasn't a single party in this country who was friendly to business. Business was either an elite or it was a bad polluter. And why would you bother? Why do you want to invest here if that's the kind of treatment that you're going to get? It's not easy being an entrepreneur. Any entrepreneurs in the house? Anyone run a family business? It ain't easy, is it? It's not easy. We thank you for doing it, by the way, because you guys actually employ people, but it's important. And the last thing I would say, and I say it with great trepidation because I'm sitting in Ottawa, but you're not going to improve productivity in this country by growing the public sector. Some of you are nodding, so thank you. A lot of you are smiling.
It's good. I think it's good.
We need to grow the private sector.
Yeah. There's another question on here. We were talking about this at dinner a bit about caregiving and productivity.
Yeah.
So I'll read the question, which is, what thoughts do you have on the impact of caregiving on productivity in Canada? And what should we do differently as policymakers?
Okay. So full disclosure, for those of you who know, and some of you may know because I'm open about it, 10 years ago, my husband, Bruce, was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's. He was 56 years old. He's still alive. He's in Baycrest right now, a wonderful facility in Toronto. He's in a wheelchair. We're coming towards the end of our arc in the Alzheimer's world. And I've seen a lot, and I've met a lot of people along the way. And the statistics that I now have the ability to stop and look at because I'm no longer in the heat of the moment trying to deal with caregiving are staggering. So let me start by letting you know that in Canada, we have the highest prevalence of young onset Alzheimer's in the world. 135.8 people per 100,000 population has young onset Alzheimer's. The comparison is 17.6 globally. 135 to 17.6. I never knew that until today. And the problem with this is that there is a staggering hit on productivity for people who have to care in the young onset Alzheimer's or in the frontal temporal dementia world, FTD as we call it. You may know FTD because Bruce Willis has it, and he talks about it. It usually starts with aphasia, then it moves to behavioral issues, then it moves to the stages of Alzheimer's that you're probably more aware of, the forgetfulness. My husband probably had FTD, but we just never diagnosed it as such. It was a long time ago. But let me tell you about the specific hits on productivity and the economic cost, because again, it's staggering. The people who end up providing the care in that world are usually called the sandwich generation. So you're caring for your children, and now you're going to be caring for your spouse as well. And for Alzheimer's in general, for your aging parents too. The national cost of unpaid caregiving for dementia is projected to reach $27.8 billion by 2050, and that's for all of them. But if you are one of the ones with young onset Alzheimer's, you spend more money out of pocket, you have less access to pensions, you don't have disability support, you don't have home care funding, and you're not going to be admitted to nursing homes because you're too young. So in young onset Alzheimer's caregiving, FTD caregiving, 50 to 70% of caregivers see a reduction in employment. Either they leave completely or they go part-time, they miss promotions, and they're out of the workforce. And think about it. I was 46 years old when my husband got young onset Alzheimer's. Between 46 and 60, those are the years. Those are your prime years. Those are the years you're really productive and you've finished your training, you're adding to society. This is where you're really kicking it in. And I was just out. I was out of the system. And that's happening over and over and over again. It is such a burden on a family. And I'm not saying this because I'm complaining or crying. I'm not. I'm letting you know because there are some real problems with possibly some of your friends who may be going through this right now. 20 to 30% of caregivers have a fully job loss because of young onset Alzheimer's. They've estimated that workdays lost per month is 15 workdays a month when you're caregiving for somebody with young onset Alzheimer's. You've got appointments. They've got behavioral issues. You're constantly on call. They're up all night. You don't know if you can go to work in the morning. Home care doesn't show up because they're afraid of them. It's stunning. I want to thank you for asking the question. I warned you that I had a lot of statistics on this, but if you have an opportunity for a platform and an ability to educate, maybe one of you knows somebody whose spouse has been diagnosed recently. It is not easy. I encourage you to help them find a way to connect with either the FTD Society or the Alzheimer's Society or where they can. But at the other end of it, the amount of emotional strain and burnout as well is something that is quantified. And the productivity loss is staggering. And the last part I will let you know is that it's not getting better. In fact, it's projected that we're going to have a 43% increase in young onset Alzheimer's between now and 2050. So it's not a problem that's going away. It's ripping out an entire section, mainly women, of society between the ages of 40 and 60. Early retirement, not actually able to participate in work, and we can quantify it and we can see it. So how do we fix that? It's not difficult. If we refocused and thought about caregiving in these specific cases and in the case of Alzheimer's writ large, and thought about it in the ways that we deal with childcare, in the ways that we deal with daycare, in the ways that we deal with the early years that we all support, because here's the thing that you may not understand or realize. It's not the Alzheimer's that you see in a movie that, they get Alzheimer's, they forget a few things, then they die. My husband is now in year 12, and he's not going anywhere for another couple of years. So our family has a 15-year involvement with this disease and caregiving. And that's the reality of it. So it is going to have a bigger impact. There aren't enough homes at all. There's not enough home workers. And we're just going to continuously push on this to families who are not going to be able to cope. And unfortunately, what does happen, especially in young onset, is families are pushed to the brink where they bring their loved one to the hospital and they leave them on the doorstep. And they say that they can't work with them anymore, and thus the province has to look after them. And it happens over and over again. And if you don't know that, you should know that, because that is oftentimes the only way these poor families are able to deal with it. All right. Sorry for the downer.
No, thank you for sharing that, particularly about your own personal experience with it. I'm going to shift. There was another question earlier, which you talked about the private sector and stuff, but of course, Ottawa, I always like to point out, Ottawa does have a robust private sector, but we are, of course, a government town. Many people here work or did work in public service. There was a question there about, what can the public service do to contribute towards this agenda? What is the role for the public service?
Well, I will tell you this, and it's no word of lie. Some of the smartest people that I've worked with in my career are from the public sector. Some of these deputies some deputies pound for pound, as good a CEO of anybody in a private sector, ADMs as well. There's so much talent here, and it's talented people who choose to give back to public sector, who could be doing so much better in the private sector, and I have nothing but admiration and thankfulness for it. But we got to give them tools. We got to give them the tools, and we got to give them the resources to do the jobs that they want to do or that they have to do. And I'll give you an example. One way that we can encourage and support better relations with other countries is to do something very simple. And we did it with the United States when we were in government, and they did a little bit of it in the Trudeau government as well. And that is just to have a regulatory cooperation agreement, a committee across the border where you allow some officials in Canada work directly with some officials in the United States on a daily basis to try to figure out how we make sure the border doesn't thicken. How do we make sure that it makes sense in terms of I was in transport at the time, so that's my frame of reference. But they had that support both from their deputy and from me as the minister to do that work. So that's how it works. It's to make sure that the officials ask for the tools and then are able to have the resources to do the projects that are necessary.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question we have in front of us here is, we talk about the U.S. a lot, but what does the new government mean for Canada's global relations? When you talk about Canada and the world, to the outside the U.S. agenda?
Well, everybody's new, it seems. Everybody's new. I mean, Mr. Trump is back for his second term. I think the G7 is going to be fascinating. I think it's going to be pop the popcorn time. It's going to be interesting. The good thing about the Prime Minister is that nothing's going to faze him. And he is, he is calm, cool, collected. He has been in a diplomatic type of role for many, many years. For him to be able to make it through that crazy interview today with Donald Trump, he may have pulled a few faces, but I probably would have punched him, to be honest. It was wild. When he was going off on the Obama library, what is this lunatic talking about? But so I am, partisanship aside, I will be full out. I don't think the Liberals have the right economic plan, but I'm a conservative, and that's what I'm going to say. But do I have confidence in Mark Carney's ability to maneuver on the world stage and represent Canada well? Absolutely, I do. And he better do well, because we'll be back to test him.
Well, good. Excellent. Well, that segues into another question we have in front of us. And we've been talking about public policy. We've certainly talked a bit about you're out of active politics these days. But there's a question in front of us. Why do you think the Conservative Party fell short in this election?
I know what you think I'm going to say, but I'm not. So we talked about this, the Dean and I talked about this a little bit ahead of time. Well, actually, I talked, she listened. It was very nice of her to listen to me. I did some door knocking, and Mr. Nader and I talked about this. I door knocked in a little bit in Nova Scotia. I wouldn't say I went door to door in Nova Scotia. I just kind of hung out with my sister and her friends at a safe grad thing and talked politics there. So it was a focus group of 30. It was pretty good. Not a single one of them were voting Conservative, by the way, so it wasn't that great. It was not a great vibe for me. But I also was able to talk to folks in Burlington, Oakville. I did a lot of work in downtown Toronto. We had some really great candidates there. And I said this on CTV, and I'll say it again, and I believe it to be the case. I do believe that Canadians did appreciate and like the Conservative platform. Argue, if you will, about what it was or what it wasn't, but people did like axing the carbon tax, and they did like the capital gains adjustment, and they did like the investment of capital gains into Canadian companies. That was very popular and really good. And I do hope that this government looks at those good ideas and does take them into their own. And I don't think there's any harm or foul in doing that. Good ideas are good ideas. That being said, although that Canadians did seem to like these policies, the reality is that they did want Mark Carney to implement them. Maybe for the same reasons that I just said, which is, I have a comfort level that on the world stage, Mark Carney is not going to trip and fall or show his socks. You can only go up. So I think that's part of it. I don't know how you fix that. Maybe let's talk about things that matter to women who look like me. And you heard my rant on caregiving. Come up with some really innovative policy on stuff that's really rocking our world. And you know, any woman my age and older, they're dealing with that. With their mother, with their spouse, with their grandchildren. That is the topic of conversation. So come up with some good policies around stuff that really connect with us, and you'll get a chance. You get a hearing at the door. If you answer your door and not go to the Ring doorbell.
We mentioned that.
The bane of our existence, technology.
Well, there was another question that popped up a bit earlier. We talked about the private sector and the public sector. There's a question about the role of NGOs and civil society actors in this, particularly this agenda of sustainable and inclusive prosperity.
Yeah.
Can you speak a bit about, is there a role for that sector here?
Absolutely. And that's one of the beautiful things about the coalition is that Goodwill Industries belongs to our coalition. The community foundations belong to our coalition. LIUNA belongs to our coalition, as well as the Business Council, the Chamber of Commerce. Everybody is there because we're putting partisanship aside, but we're focused on one thing. What is a scorecard? What's it look like? How are we measuring? We've found a venue in which we can all agree, and we all agree on long-term economic growth is important for the country, that is sustainable and inclusive, and it's a mantra for us. So those are really important. I encourage younger people to get involved. I mean, you know, when I was growing up, I'm at that stage in my life, when I was growing up, the Rotary Club, the Optimist Club, all of those civil society organizations, so important. You know, they were fundraising for hospitals. They were doing education, the Rotary scholarships, where you got actually to do an exchange. I don't know if they still do that. Those things were fantastic. And we do need to have more of that civil society engagement. We should reward it. We should reward it. We should recognize it and reward it and thank people who are doing those kinds of things. For me, in my post-political life, I sit on the board of Care Canada, which I enjoy very much, trying to help women and girls around the world. I was a little bit afraid of the foreign aid cuts that happen in the United States. They're significant, and they are off-putting and destabilizing and all those things. But I do believe that if you want to prevent war in the world, you have to lift up and support the women in other countries in those developing areas. So we're going to, you know, if you have an interest in any of those things, or you want to help in your community, like I said in the speech, we just don't have the grace and favor to sit back and coast anymore. No drifting allowed, man. We're all in. And if you don't want to be a politician, smart move. Do join a civic society, join a club, start a club, all those good things. And if you want to join the partisan clubs too, they're good. We can always, they do good work as well. Yeah.
We've got a few more minutes, and I've been instructed to make sure that please open questions to the audience. We do have a mic available if people want to ask questions. We have a few more minutes.
Sorry.
That's fine. And maybe as we do that, I'll ask another question that we have in front of us. What action should the next government and opposition parties take to reduce division and anger in Canada? Would you like to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can. Grow the damn economy. Nothing makes people happier than feeling that they're doing well in life. I'm scared of a recession. I think in a recession, we all turn small and petty and narrow and worried, and we scramble for resources. It's a natural way. And I think part of what we're seeing right now is people are scrambling for resources because they perceive that they're not doing as well. And a politician telling them, you're wrong, look how well we do in the G20, ain't gonna cut it. So, you know, it's a conversation going in two different ways. So I think that the opposition, all of them, and the government should try to work together to fast-track legislation that clearly is going to light our economy on fire. And to me, that is always going to be about getting resource projects going. We're in the mess we're in right now. This is my personal opinion. Take it for what it is. But I believe that we're in the mess right now because the last 20 years, we haven't been able to get out of our own way to ensure we met the standards and the consent and the consultation obligations we have in order to get projects needed to get our oil and gas to tidewater. And if we did that, we wouldn't have Donald Trump. toying with us the way he is, because he's the only game in town.
Is there a mic, or is there just, if people are interested, please raise your hand and we can bring a mic to you.
You can argue with me too. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm used to being yelled at by my kids. It's okay. Oh, good. We have did you have your hand? Oh, you're just stretching. Sorry.
That's fine. At that, well, we do
thought
the
you put
mic.
your hand
Just
up.
raise your hand and we go bring the mic.
We have a brave. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're asking about entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I'm not it, but my family are in the trades for 3 generations of cabinet makers, woodworkers, and so on. And my partner just sold his company
Yep.
to an American company, because that's what happens in Canada. So my question to you is how are we going to grow the trades and value them and educate them to build this kind of housing you're talking about, and to do so for the long term across political parties, because that's what we're going to need, because the trades are not valued at the moment and they're not well remunerated. And how are we going to keep Canadian business here? And how are we going to start buying from Canadian businesses, whether they be IT, whether they be energy, whether they be the trades, and how are we going to manufacture here? How are we going to produce our own lumber to build our own houses here? How would we do that?
Okay. That is a lot. That's okay, but that is the crux of it, right? That is, if you want to talk about a crossroad, that's it. How do we go from relying upon the growth and the purchasing ability of the United States to being self-sufficient? And I know we love talking about interprovincial trade barriers, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not the quick solution. Don't believe it for a second, because mark my words, and those in the know, if you know, you know, if you've ever been to a federal, provincial, territorial meeting, and I've been to a couple of them, and free trade comes up on the table, what always happens is, yes, we do believe in free trade, thank you very much. And here's our list of exemptions that we would like to have. Any free trade deal that we get provincially is going to have an appendix of things that the provinces are going to have to hold back on for their own economy. Anyway, to all of your questions, I think what it has to do with is making Canada a place where starting a small business and scaling it up is easy, inexpensive, and if it fails, it's not devastating to your future. Because it's neither of those at the moment. It's expensive, it's not necessarily easily scalable, because you have regulations, problems about hiring. And certainly, at the end of the day, if it fails, people tend to want to go for a safe job after that, because they've tried and that hunger and ambition isn't there. It's a culture change, in a way, which is going to take a lot longer than the immediacy of it. But if you do put in place those kinds of things, what I'm most impressed about with Gen Z, the generation that is coming into working age right now, is their entrepreneurialism. They don't mind the gig economy. They like having a side hustle. They're willing to do that stuff. And if it's rewarded, they'll grow it and they'll continue. As for selling to the United States, that's always going to be a problem, because obviously it's the bigger market. The government has made some moves to try to protect those industries or those businesses that are deemed to be part of our security infrastructure, part of our supply chains. I'm okay with that. I think that's smart, as long as it doesn't chill too much investment in the country from other countries, because you still need to have that kind of thing. On the trades, I made the joke at the beginning about how, my mom really wanted me to be a doctor. It's actually not quite true. I was brought up, my grandmother brought me up. I'm the youngest of 7, 6 her children, and then she brought up me. But she was missing the nun or the priest in the family. So I was the last chance to be the nun. It didn't take, obviously. But professionals, marrying a professional and accountant was fine in our family, but bringing home a trade, now they're golden, because then you're going to have somebody to be able to do the work around. So there are pockets of the country that do value the trades and do value what it brings to the community. And how we do what we need to do in that space is create the projects that are going to be there for a long period of time, you know that you can have the job for life because you're going to go from this project to this project to this project to this project. See, the beautiful part about being in professions is that you become a lawyer. You think you've got a job for 25 years. If you're in the trades, you're hustling. You're waiting to see for the next gig to come by. And that's the housing issue as well. The solution for our housing problems is to do manufactured housing, is to, instead of a bunch of people going and building one house on one piece of property, a bunch of people going to one site and building pieces of the house to be assembled on the property. Nothing wrong with that. That's what Sweden does. It's 80% of their housing is done that way. And that way you can be assured if you have that book of business, you're going to have people in the trades. Lastly, I'll give you an example of a Canadian success story, National Steel Car. National Steel Car is, I think it's the largest manufacturer of hoppers and cars, of rail cars in North America. I think it's North America. We're the biggest in Canada. Well, we're the only in Canada. They're the only in Canada. There's none in the United States, and there's a couple in Mexico. And the thing about National Steel Car is they hire right off of the street, and they train welders, and they make $45 an hour, and they have a pension, and they've got a great health care. And that is a great way of encouraging the trades. So people are just coming in from high school, and they are being trained up, and they know they have a job, and they've got a book of business, and they're going to be there for 25 years. So it is long-term thinking, changing the way that we do things. I know we like to talk about the stigma, but nothing kills a stigma more than a really high-paying job that you're going to have for a long period of time, that you're going to enjoy. That's it. And as always, being former Minister of Labour, making it as safe and clean as possible to do it, so you get rid of all that nonsense about it being a dirty job. So I hope I helped. And I hope I encourage somebody to go into the trades. It's great. I'm not the one to do it. I'm not handy at all.
Okay. I think we have another. Go ahead.
This one's just short, and it's related to what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Back for most of us in here anyway, probably, high school had trade stuff. You could take auto mechanics, all that kind of stuff. By the time I started becoming a teacher, it was already starting to get scaled down.
Yeah.
None of my nieces and nephews are there things like that at their school. There might be one in the city. Now, they're from up north, so Sudbury runs things a little differently, I think, than a lot of school boards. But for the most part, if you're trying to take a good math class or good science class, good English class, well, no, they don't have any trade stuff you can take as well. And it means that you end up, if you do want to be into it, you go into college, you get there. My nephew spent a whole year, I hate this.
Yeah.
Switch again, I hate this. Because he didn't get to take one class in high school that he could take. Is this one of the things that the government should be looking towards? I know that it's provincial, but the federal government can, that's one of the things federal government can fund is, here's funding that's only for setting up high school trade.
Yeah.
Is that something that would help build what you were talking about?
Yeah, I think those are all good ideas, and I am of the same kind of experience as you, which is there was vocational school when I was growing up, and you could pick and go to a vocational school and pick up a trade or figure out what you want. I have a niece who's just started community college in plumbing. She hated it. Now she's going to sit out for a year and go back to something else and try it, but she didn't have the opportunity to do that in high school. And maybe you're right. Maybe that was the fix, that they needed to get a taste of it in high school to see if that's something. So how the germ of the question, though, is a good one, and that is when you know something is a provincial responsibility, but you think there's going to be a federal response that could be helpful, how do we make everybody work together, right? When we solve that problem in politics, we will get ahead, I think. But the best way to do it, again, is civic engagement is so important, and to MPPs oftentimes do roundtables in their communities. It really helps when you take your time to go. It does actually matter when you go and you give those kinds of advice. You may think it doesn't help, but we do listen, we do take notes, and when you have the opportunity to be a minister, you never know what's actually going to be something that stays with you. Brian Mulroney, I think I was told, actually had a First Ministers Conference on the topic of education when he was first elected. That wasn't his responsibility, but he still did it. I think education is going to be something that's going to be looked at. It's definitely part of our economic engine, and it should be. And if it needs to be tweaked, then everybody should be talking about it. But again, more citizens saying to politicians, we can't drift anymore, we need actual answers, is the path forward. And you don't have to wait for elections to do it, I would submit. I don't think we can wait for elections, because this one could go on for a while.
Okay. There's a question over here.
Over here.
Okay, all right.
I've been ignoring this side of the room all night. I'm so
Yeah, I
sorry.
know.
I'll turn this way now.
I think this is working. Yeah.
Do I have a bald spot on the back of my head?
No, but I do.
Okay.
Hi. Actually, I have a question about the housing you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. You mentioned that you were, I believe, housing and climate.
Yeah.
You know.
Task Force on Housing and Climate.
So I find a lot of the times when we're talking about the climate or the housing crisis that's going on right now, we talk about building homes and houses and home ownership. But I wonder about the role that alternative housing options have, like nonprofit housing cooperatives, for example. And it seems like they may be an unspoken about part of the solution that could also reduce the climate impact of building a bunch of little boxes on a whole lot of land.
Yeah.
If we can build buildings on a smaller plot of land, a bit of density, but also rent control and making sure that it's still affordable for people.
Yeah.
I wonder what your thoughts are on the role that those alternatives play in the bigger housing crisis.
There was, so it's really interesting. One of the tougher questions we had in the task force was defining what affordable housing was. Because what is affordable housing? What's affordable to one is not affordable to other. So we use the terminology non-market housing, meaning the housing that's not being utilized. But we defined it even more specifically. And the goal, we said, should be that an individual house is not spending more than 30% of their total income on shelter. That's the aspirational goal. What you define it as underneath that, is it a co-op? Is it affordable housing? Is it social housing? Let them worry about their definitions. But the goal of the government in determining where they're going to send funding should be to create a system where you're only spending 30% of your income on your shelter. Part of we had 121 recommendations we made to all different orders of government, provincial, municipal, and federal. A lot of it had to do with getting out of the way, quite frankly, regulatory, making 6 stories as of right, which I know is controversial in zoning and stuff like that. Building in places where you are right now, meaning that take advantage of infill, taking advantage of building where the lines were, and really looking at Toronto and avoiding going out into places where you, quite frankly, had to spend more energy to put in the pipes and to put in the roads and stuff like that. And then finally, getting rid of parking minimums, and in apartment buildings, getting rid of some of the 2 stairway conditions that we had. Like I'm talking about things that a lot of people in the room, you're nodding, you understand what I'm saying. If people understood the rigmarole that we've put ourselves through that actually do prevent us from building housing, you'd be surprised. We take so long to get a development going in this country. A lot of it has to do with self-inflicted regulatory matters because we are risk averse and afraid of somebody coming back and saying, you made a mistake. You're welcome.
Okay. Josh is getting almost ready to get us off the stage, but I'm going to have one final closing question, which was up on the screen. I think is a good closing question. It was up earlier. It was, what would you tell your 19-year-old self today?
Oh my God.
Not everyone here, I think, is 19, so it might be a little bit, but
because your knees are going to give out and you're not going to like it. What else? I'm going to turn my back on you on that question. What would I tell my 19-year-old self?
Because you talked at the beginning about your career and about failure in particular and things there. And speaking to either 19-year-old Lisa Raitt or young people today, we do have a lot in the audience here like that. What would sort of be your final advice?
Yeah, I would say this is a little bit meta, but I would say turning 50 really does change a person's perspective, and I'm a lot easier on myself. But I would say, don't assume that somebody is thinking about you, because they're not thinking about you, they're thinking about themselves. Don't worry about what other people are thinking about you, because they're thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you. And I think that's kind of freeing, and that goes to ambition, that goes to fear of failure, that goes to wanting to try new things. Like, I would tell my 19-year-old self to continue to take risks. I've always taken risks in my life, but I had no choice, because I came from a household in Cape Breton, and you know what it's like, Laura, where your path out of Cape Breton, if you chose, was through education. And if you didn't look after yourself, no one else was going to. And in fact, the expectation was that you would give back to the household, not that. So it's kind of weird now for my sons to be saying, well, Mom, you're going to pay for all this stuff. And I said, well, when I was your age, I was paying board to my grandmother. But that's what I tell myself. What I do tell my 20-year-old son, and what I do tell, for example, a lot of fresh-faced, bright and shiny interns started in banking on Monday at CIBC. And what I tell them is, as well, look for risk, take a chance. That's what's going to build this country. That's what's going to propel us. Those who take the chance and those who want to make us better. We need those people. And it's not all of us who can do it, but encourage everybody, and you'll get a few of those bright stars coming forth.
I think that's a great thing to close on. So thank you very much. I think Josh is going to
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Lisa. Thank all of you. Those were phenomenal questions. I know there were still a few hands that were up. There were more questions coming through on the monitor. We do invite you to join us for a reception across the hall, and you can corner Lisa and ask her the questions you didn't get a chance to ask, or others as well. I was listening to the presentation, Lisa's lecture, the nature of the questions, and we sit around our faculty table, and of course, the dean mentioned, we've got a School of Public Policy, a Department of Political Science, International Affairs, and so it is natural that our faculty would host a lecture like this. But of course, we also have a Department of Economics, a School of Social Work, a School of Journalism and Communication, Law and Legal Studies, and all of those units, I could almost imagine the heads nodding throughout the course of your lecture, Lisa. It really cut across the various themes and issues that we take up in the Faculty of Public and Global Affairs. So thank you for an enlightening discussion. Thank you all once again. I'm going to invite the Dean back up to give you a parting gift. And then I think, I don't know if this was a COVID era thing that just stuck, but we're going to have a group photo. Yeah. With us on stage and all of you in the background. So we'll impose on you to stand up, we'll take a photo, and then we'll exit back out up the ramp to the reception hall across. So I'll turn things over to Brenda now.
I just want to say how great that was, and I'm nodding away when you said, don't worry what people think about you. That is such good advice. So yes, thank you so much. We have a little...